At exactly 6:45 this morning, I found myself standing barefoot in my backyard with no memory of how I got there. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was the voice I heard on the phone at 3 a.m., my own voice, begging me to survive until sunrise. My name is Vanessa Reed. I'm 34 years old, and I teach art at Lincoln High School here in Portland, Oregon. My life is pretty simple. I wake up, teach teenagers about color theory and perspective drawing, grade projects, and go home to my small house on Maple Street. On weekends, I meet my younger sister Brooke for brunch, and most evenings, I FaceTime my dad Richard, who moved to Arizona 3 years ago after my mom died. It's a quiet life. Some people might even call it boring, but I liked it that way. Predictable felt safe. That Tuesday night started like any other. I'd spent the evening organizing art supplies for my Monday morning class. Construction paper, brushes, and bottles of acrylic paint covered my dining table. Around 9, Brooke called me on FaceTime. She's getting married in 6 months, and wedding planning has taken over her entire brain. She was stressed about the seating chart, worried about whether to put our loud cousin Derek next to Aunt Susan or near the back by the DJ booth. "Brooke, you're overthinking this," I told her, laughing at how serious she looked. "Nobody's going to remember where they sat. They're going to remember the food and whether the bar runs out of wine." She rolled her eyes but smiled. We talked for about an hour before saying goodnight around 10:30. I washed my face, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed. I'm usually a deep sleeper. My phone stays on my nightstand on silent mode because I hate being woken up by random notifications. I can sleep through thunderstorms, car alarms, everything. That's why waking up at 3:17 in the morning felt so wrong. My bedroom was completely dark. No storm, no noise, nothing that should have pulled me out of sleep, but my phone screen was glowing on the floor across the room. I definitely hadn't knocked it off my nightstand. I'm careful about that. I got out of bed and picked it up, squinting at the bright screen. My heart started pounding before my brain could even process what I was seeing. 53 missed calls, all from the same number, my number, not a similar number, not someone trying to prank me with a fake caller ID. My exact phone number had called me 53 times in the past 20 minutes. I scrolled through the call log with shaking hands. Each call was just seconds apart, like someone had been hitting redial over and over, desperate to reach me. My throat felt tight. This didn't make sense. You can't call your own phone. That's not how phones work. And then it rang again. Same number flashing on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before I found the courage to answer. "Hello?" The voice that responded made my stomach drop. It was my voice. I know my own voice. I've heard it in videos, in recordings, on voicemails. This was me, but the tone was all wrong. Panicked, breathless, terrified. "Vanessa, listen to me. Don't hang up. You need to stay inside. Lock every door in the house. Don't go near the windows. You'll understand by sunrise. Please, just trust me." "Wait, what? Who is this? How are you?" The line went dead. I sat on my bedroom floor holding my phone, trying to convince myself I was still asleep. This had to be a nightmare. But my call log was right there. 53 missed calls. 1 answered call lasting 42 seconds. The timestamp read 3:19 a.m. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I opened my text messages and typed quickly to Brooke, "Call me right now. Something weird is happening." Then I sent the same message to my dad. "Before I do anything else, I need to ask you something. If you're watching this video right now, please hit that subscribe button. I share real stories like this one, and I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about myself." I sat on my bedroom floor staring at my phone, waiting for Brooke or my dad to text me back. Nothing. The house felt different now, like the walls were watching me. I kept replaying that voice in my head. My voice. The panic in it was real. Whoever that was, whatever was happening, they sounded absolutely terrified. I stood up and turned on every single light in my bedroom. The bright overhead light made me feel slightly less crazy, but my heart was still racing. I needed to check the house. The voice told me to lock every door, and even though I didn't understand why, I was going to do it. I walked through my house, turning on lights as I went, Kitchen, living room, bathroom, spare bedroom. Every light switch I could find. I checked the front door first. Locked. The chain was on. I moved to the back door in the kitchen. Also locked. The deadbolt was turned. I checked every window on the first floor. All of them were closed and latched. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing seemed out of place. My coffee mug from earlier that evening was still sitting in the sink. The art supplies were still scattered across my dining table exactly where I'd left them. Everything was normal. So why did I feel like something was horribly wrong? I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror as I passed by. Same brown hair pulled into a messy bun. Same tired eyes with dark circles underneath. Same faded cotton pajamas with little stars on them that I'd worn to bed. I looked exactly like myself, but the longer I stared, the more I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I splashed cold water on my face and told myself to calm down. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe this was some kind of sick prank. But how would anyone even pull that off? How do you fake someone's exact phone number and their exact voice? I grabbed my phone again and called Brooke. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried my dad. Straight to voicemail without even ringing. It was after 3 in the morning in Arizona, so of course he wasn't answering. I sent them both another text. This time I wrote exactly what happened. 53 calls from my own number. A voice that sounded like me telling me to stay inside. I knew it sounded insane, but I needed someone to know. At 4:15, I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. A soft scraping sound coming from outside. It was faint but deliberate, like something being dragged across concrete. I froze in the middle of my living room, holding my breath, listening. There it was again, scraping, then silence, then scraping again. It was coming from my backyard. I crept toward the kitchen window, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stood to the side of the window and slowly pulled back the edge of the blinds, just enough to peek outside. My backyard looked empty, just shadows from the big oak tree swaying in the wind. The moonlight was dim, but I could make out the shape of my garden shed in the corner and the small vegetable patch I'd planted last spring. Everything seemed still, but then I saw them. Footprints. Muddy footprints leading from my back door to the center of the yard. Bare footprints. Small. My size. I stepped back from the window, my mind racing. I hadn't been outside. I went to bed at 11 and woke up at 3:17. I was sure of it, but I had to check. I walked to the back door and reached for the handle. It turned easily. Unlocked. The door was unlocked. I know I checked it earlier. I specifically remember turning the deadbolt and hearing it click into place. But now, it was open. My phone buzzed in my hand and I nearly dropped it. A text message from my own number. It said exactly this. Don't fight it. You've already been outside. Check your feet. My stomach twisted into a knot. I looked down at my bare feet. Mud. Dark, wet mud caked under my toenails and smeared across the soles of my feet. I started shaking. I had been outside, but I had no memory of it. I stood in my kitchen staring at my muddy feet, trying to piece together what was happening. My brain kept rejecting the evidence right in front of me. I didn't go outside. I would remember going outside, but the mud was real. The unlocked door was real. Those footprints in my backyard were real. Something was happening to me, and I needed answers. I couldn't just stand here waiting for sunrise like the voice on the phone told me to. I needed to know what was in my backyard and why I had apparently walked out there without remembering a single second of it. I ran upstairs and pulled on a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely tie my boots. I grabbed the flashlight I keep in my hallway closet and the pepper spray my dad gave me when I first moved into this house. He made me promise I'd keep it by my bed. I'd always thought it was unnecessary. But right now, I was grateful for it. I took a deep breath, unlocked the back door again, and stepped outside into the cold October air. The temperature hit me immediately. It was probably 40 degrees, and the wind cut right through my sweatshirt. My breath came out in white clouds. The neighborhood was completely silent. No cars on the street, no lights on in any of the houses around me, just darkness and the sound of wind moving through the trees. I turned on my flashlight and followed the muddy footprints across my yard. They led straight to the area near my garden shed, where my small vegetable patch had mostly died off for the season. The beam from my flashlight caught something that made me stop cold. The ground looked disturbed. There was a patch of fresh dirt, darker and looser than the soil around it. It looked like something had been buried there recently, or maybe dug up. I knelt down on the cold grass and started brushing away the loose dirt with my hands. The soil was damp and got under my fingernails, mixing with the mud already there. I dug about 6 inches down before my fingers hit something solid. Wood. I cleared away more dirt until I could see the shape of it. A small wooden box, maybe the size of a shoebox, with a brass latch on the front. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. I pulled the box out of the ground and carried it back inside, leaving a trail of dirt across my kitchen floor. I set the box on my dining table under the bright overhead light and stared at it for a full minute before touching it again. The wood was old and scratched, like it had been buried for a while, but the brass latch was newer. I grabbed a butter knife from my kitchen drawer and used it to pry the latch open. The lid creaked as I lifted it. Inside was a journal, a brown leather journal with pages that looked worn and filled with writing. I picked it up with shaking hands and opened to the first page. The handwriting was mine. I recognized my own messy cursive, the way I loop my Y's and cross my T's. But I had never seen this journal before in my life. The first entry was dated 3 weeks ago. It was a detailed account of my day, what I taught in my classes, what I ate for lunch, a conversation I had with Brooke about her wedding flowers, things I definitely did, but never wrote down anywhere. I flipped through the pages frantically. Every single entry was in my handwriting. Every single one described my life in detail. Doctor appointments I'd gone to, groceries I'd bought, thoughts I'd had while driving home from work. It was like reading someone else's diary about my life. I turned to the last entry. It was dated today. The words were messier, like they'd been written in a hurry. My hands shook as I read, "If you're reading this, you've already lost hours. It's happening faster now. By tonight, you won't remember who you are. The only way to stop it is to find the source. Check the art room. Locker 47. You hid it there yesterday, but you won't remember. Hurry." I looked at my phone. It was 6:30 in the morning. The sky outside my kitchen window was starting to turn gray. Sunrise was in 15 minutes. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed my car keys off the counter, shoved my phone in my pocket, and ran out my front door, still holding the journal. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I had maybe 15 minutes before the school staff started arriving, and I needed to get into that art room before anyone saw me. I pulled out of my driveway and drove through my neighborhood like a maniac. I ran a red light at the intersection near the grocery store, then another one by the post office. My mind was racing faster than my car. What did I hide in locker 47? Why couldn't I remember doing it? And what did the journal mean when it said I was losing hours? I reached Lincoln High School at 6:42. The parking lot was completely empty. The building looked dark and silent against the pink sunrise starting to break over the horizon. I used my teacher key card to unlock the main entrance and ran down the hallway toward the art room. My footsteps echoed off the lockers. The fluorescent lights flickered on automatically as I moved through the building. When I reached my classroom, my hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys twice before I could get the door open. The art room smelled like paint and paper, familiar and comforting, even though nothing else about this morning made sense. I went straight to the storage lockers along the back wall. We use them for old supplies, extra canvas boards, and materials we don't need regular access to. Locker 47 wasn't assigned to any student. It was just storage. I yanked the metal door open and immediately saw that something was different. There was a manila envelope taped to the inside back panel. My name was written across the front in my handwriting. I pulled the envelope down and ripped it open. Inside were papers, hospital papers. I pulled them out under the classroom lights and started reading. It was a discharge form from St. Vincent Medical Center dated 2 months ago, September 15th. My name was printed at the top. Patient, Vanessa Reed. And then I saw the diagnosis line. Acute carbon monoxide poisoning with resulting early onset dissociative fugue disorder. I read it 3 times before the words started to make sense. Carbon monoxide. my furnace, the old furnace in my basement that I kept meaning to get serviced but never did because it seemed fine. It was still heating my house. It wasn't making weird noises. I thought it could wait until winter really hit. The pieces started falling into place so fast I felt sick. The headaches I'd been having for weeks that I blamed on stress. The weird moments where I'd find myself in a room with no memory of walking there. The time I found my car parked at the grocery store when I could have sworn I parked on the other side of the lot. I thought I was just tired. I thought I was overworked. My phone rang and I nearly screamed. Brooke's name flashed on the screen. I answered it. "Vanessa, oh my God, where are you? Dad and I have been trying to reach you all night. We're at your house right now with the fire department." Her voice was panicked and talking fast. "Your carbon monoxide detector went off around 3 this morning. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, heard the alarm through her bedroom window and called 911. The fire department broke down your door. Vanessa, the levels in your house were dangerous. Where are you?" I started crying. The tears came so fast I could barely breathe. "I'm at the school. Brooke, I've been having episodes. I've been writing myself messages and I didn't even know. I buried a journal in my backyard. I called myself 53 times trying to warn myself. I don't remember any of it. The paramedics are here. They said you're lucky. If you'd stayed asleep in that house, you could have died. Come home right now. We need to get you checked out." I could hear my dad's voice in the background, asking if I was okay. I sat down on the floor of my art room, surrounded by student paintings and supplies, holding hospital papers that explained everything. My brain had been slowly poisoning itself, and somewhere deep inside, it had been fighting to save me. I drove back to my house in a daze. The morning sun was fully up now, bright and almost painfully normal looking. When I turned onto my street, I saw the fire truck parked in front of my house, lights still flashing. 2 paramedics were standing on my front lawn talking to Brooke and my dad. I didn't even know my dad had flown in from Arizona. The second Brooke saw my car, she ran toward me. I barely had the door open before she pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. My dad was right behind her, his eyes red like he'd been crying. He wrapped both of us in his arms, and I felt 6 years old again, safe and protected. But I also felt terrified, because I knew how close I'd come to never seeing them again. The paramedics checked my vital signs right there on the lawn: blood pressure, oxygen levels, pupil response. They asked me questions about my symptoms. Had I been experiencing headaches? Yes, for weeks. Dizziness? Sometimes. Memory problems? I told them about the journal, the phone calls, the hours I couldn't account for. One of the paramedics, a woman named Jessica with kind eyes, explained what had been happening to me. Carbon monoxide poisoning doesn't just make you sleepy. At certain levels, it affects your brain in bizarre ways. It can cause confusion, memory loss, and in some cases, something called a fugue state, where you perform complex actions with no memory of doing them. My brain had been starving for oxygen, and in its confused state, it had been trying desperately to save me. The fire chief showed me the readings they'd taken from inside my house. The carbon monoxide levels in my bedroom were over 200 parts per million. Anything above 150 can cause serious neurological effects. I'd been sleeping in that room every night for who knows how long, breathing in poison. He explained that my furnace had a cracked heat exchanger, something that happens in older units. The crack was letting carbon monoxide leak into my home's ventilation system. My carbon monoxide detector should have gone off weeks ago, but when they checked it, they found the battery was dead. I'd never replaced it after it started chirping months earlier. I'd just taken the battery out and forgotten to put a new one in. The doctor at the emergency room told me I was lucky in the strangest way. My brain's response to the poisoning had been unusual. Instead of just shutting down, some part of me had stayed aware enough to recognize the danger. The journal entries, the phone calls, burying the box with clues. It was all my subconscious trying to break through the confusion and get myself to safety. The doctor said she'd never seen anything quite like it. Most people with carbon monoxide poisoning that severe just go to sleep and never wake up. But somehow, I'd fought back. I stayed with Brooke for 2 weeks while my house was professionally cleaned and cleared. The furnace was completely replaced. Every carbon monoxide detector was installed with fresh batteries, and I set phone reminders to check them monthly. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Lin who specialized in trauma and memory disorders. We talked about the fear of losing time, of not being able to trust my own mind. She told me that what I experienced would take time to process, and she was right. For months afterward, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and check my phone obsessively, making sure I hadn't called myself. I kept a detailed daily log of everything I did, everywhere I went, just to prove to myself that I was present and aware. But here's what still haunts me on quiet nights. I kept that journal. It sits in my nightstand drawer, and sometimes I pull it out and read entries about conversations I have no memory of having. My brain created an entire backup system to document my life because it knew something was wrong. It was screaming at me in the only way it could, and I almost didn't hear it in time. Now I check those carbon monoxide detectors every single week. I never ignore warning signs, no matter how small. And I learned that sometimes the person fighting hardest to save your life is you, even when you don't recognize them anymore. If this story got to you, hit that subscribe button, because I share true stories that make you think. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where you knew something was wrong, but couldn't explain why? I want to hear your stories too.